In 1851, Dr. William Farr was tasked to undertake a study to establish the origin of cholera deaths in London. He concluded that cholera was spread by miasma, that is putrid and poisonous air arising from the London sewers and the River Thames. Dr. Farr was not far wrong. Excuse the pun. We now believe that cholera is a waterborne disease, but it's not spread by noxious gases given off by the water. The mistake that Dr. Farr made was partly caused by the classification and organization of scientific knowledge in the 19th century. How we organize and classify knowledge has significant effects on what we know, how we know it, and the causal relationships that we see in the world around us. Welcome to Talk Today. Please like and subscribe to support Talk Learning. In this video we will look at 4 factors which can reduce the validity and reliability of knowledge classification systems. First up, let's define classification systems. When we're talking about classification systems, we're simply talking about ways of organizing and classifying knowledge such as the periodic table, the taxonomic system, socioeconomic class, artistic genres, mathematical number bases, historical eras, etc., etc. The first factor to be considered which can reduce the validity and reliability of classification systems is their historical evolution, and the effect that has upon the paradigms within which they currently operate. An example of this is socioeconomic class from human sciences. Contemporary concepts of social class were first used by human scientists in the early 19th century to describe people's occupational roles. This was broadened out to be linked to income levels, lifestyle, and wider cultural values. However, in the 21st century we find that occupational role is a far less reliable predictor of wider indicators of identity, cultural values and lifestyle behaviors than it was in the early 19th century. As such, the socio-economic categorization system of social class is now limited by its historical origins. The second factor which can reduce the validity and reliability of a knowledge classification system is the methodology of construction. This refers to how the classification structure was developed, and who developed it. An example of the limitations which can arise from the method of construction is seen in the hierarchy of artistic genres found in post-Renaissance visual arts. Arguably, the artistic genres are defined by the powerful gatekeepers in the arts, and they confer value relative to an artist's work within the hierarchy. The development of modern forms of art in the late 1800s, such as Impressionism, started to challenge the traditional hierarchical classification systems. Works by Impressionist artists such as Courbet, Pissarro and Manet were rejected by judges of the Paris Salon. This challenge to the conventional hierarchy of artistic genres was further challenged by the emergence of conceptual art in the 20th century. Artists from Duchamp, through Robert Morris and Henry Flint, to more recently Rachel Whiteread and Tracy Emin have had their work, status and position questioned. Conceptual art seeks to disrupt the conventional principles of artistic classification, and as such it is difficult to position it in that classification system. The third factor which can reduce the validity and reliability of a knowledge classification system is purpose. This refers to the reason why the classification system was developed, that is, the purpose for which the knowledge is organized. An example of the problems which can be encountered when a knowledge classification system is used for a purpose for which it was not intended can be seen with the criticisms made concerning the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, also known as DSM. DSM has been criticized by the anti-psychiatry movement, who argue that the DSM promotes the medicalization of normal human behavior and emotions, leading to overdiagnosis and overmedication. The DSM was devised for medical diagnosis of mental illness, but can sometimes be inappropriately applied in cases not requiring medication. Arguably, the framework of knowledge of the classification system shapes the interpretation, and therefore the treatment, of the client. Further, some patient advocacy groups have criticized the DSM for stigmatizing people with mental health conditions. They argue that the DSM's classification of mental disorders can perpetuate harmful stereotypes and discrimination against people with mental health conditions. The fourth and final factor which can reduce the validity and reliability of knowledge classification systems are the cultural biases of the society in which it was developed. Such social and cultural biases include value and status hierarchies, incomplete knowledge, inaccuracies, and ideological or faith-based beliefs. An example of such biases can be found in the classification systems found in libraries such as the Library of Congress subject heading system, and the Dewey Decimal Classification System. Both systems were developed during the 1800s, and have some of the biases prevalent at that time. For example, the Library of Congress subject headings has a category labeled contraception, and a subcategory labeled male contraception, the implication being that contraception is normative when applied to females, but not males. Similar examples can be found with the subject headings astronauts, and women astronauts, and chemists, and women chemists. It should be noted that both the Library of Congress subject headings and the Dewey Decimal systems are being updated to reflect contemporary cultural and social values. However, this does not mean that they necessarily become more objective. Contemporary values will also appear anachronistic in the future. The classification systems that we use to organize and understand the world around us are only as good as our current knowledge, values, and identified purpose. As knowledge develops, values change and we discover new purposes. The flaws in these classification systems will become evident. Of course, we can also look at the counter-argument. The knowledge classification system is sufficient for the time in which it is developed. If it is developed from the latest and best knowledge available, then it provides the best explanation of the world available at that time. Additionally, because subsequent knowledge is developed from the pre-existing classification system, it could be argued that the pre-existing classification system is both functional and accurate in its context. Well, that's enough classifying and organizing for today. I hope that you found today's video useful. Check out Talk Today for further video and blog resources to help your studies in Talk. A like or subscribe is very much appreciated. I hope to see you on the next video. Wishing you a talktastic day. Bye.